Title: Why Certain People Never Ask for Help. Your car breaks down, your laptop crashes, you're drowning in work, and your friends keep saying, why didn't you just ask for help? But the truth is, asking for help feels harder than solving the problem yourself, even when solving it yourself is nearly impossible. While everyone else seems to naturally reach out when they need support, you'd rather struggle alone than admit you can't handle something. You're not stubborn, you're not trying to be a hero. Your brain has learned that independence is safer than interdependence, and there are deep psychological reasons why some people would rather fail alone than succeed with assistance. Let's start with what's actually happening when you need help but can't ask for it. Most people see requests for help as normal social exchange. They give and receive support as part of natural relationship dynamics. But for others, asking for help triggers what psychologists call vulnerability aversion, the deep fear that needing assistance exposes weakness that others might exploit. Psychology identifies this as often rooting in early experiences, where asking for help came with significant costs. Maybe your requests were met with criticism, conditions, or emotional manipulation. Maybe you learned that needing help meant becoming indebted to people who would remind you of that debt later. Your brain developed a simple equation: independence equals safety. And here's something fascinating. People who won't ask for help often had childhoods where they became helpers rather than help receivers. You might have been the responsible one, the family problem solver, the person everyone else turned to in crisis. Asking for help now feels like role reversal that threatens your entire identity. Research shows that help-avoidant people often have what's called hyper-independent attachment style. You learn to rely exclusively on yourself because other people were inconsistent, unavailable, or came with strings attached. Your nervous system interprets needing others as dangerous vulnerability rather than normal human connection. But there's something deeper happening here that goes beyond childhood experiences. Some people avoid asking for help because they have different standards for what constitutes legitimate need. You'll help others with problems you'd never ask for help with yourself. Your threshold for emergency is much higher than most people's. So by the time you'd consider asking for help, you're often past the point where others could easily assist. Psychology reveals that many people who won't ask for help are actually highly empathetic and considerate. You're acutely aware that everyone has their own problems, responsibilities, and limitations. Asking for help feels selfish because you can imagine the burden it places on others, even when those others would genuinely want to help. And let's talk about something nobody mentions: the control factor. When you solve problems yourself, you control the timeline, the methods, and the outcomes. When you ask for help, you're depending on someone else's schedule, approach, and priorities. For people who prefer autonomy, this loss of control can feel more stressful than the original problem. There's also this thing about competency identity that affects help-seeking behavior. If being capable and self-reliant is core to how you see yourself, asking for help threatens that self-concept. You're not just getting assistance with a task, you're admitting that your fundamental identity might be incomplete or false. Research from the Journal of Social Psychology shows that people who avoid asking for help often have what's called impression management anxiety. You worry that needing assistance will change how others perceive you, shifting you from competent equal to someone who requires caretaking. This fear of status change makes struggling alone feel safer than risk social repositioning. Here's where it gets psychologically complex. Many people who won't ask for help have experienced situations where their requests were used against them later. Remember when you needed my help with becomes leverage in future conflicts. Your brain learned that asking for help creates permanent social debt that can be called in at inconvenient times. And there's something about reciprocity, anxiety, that people don't understand. When someone helps you, there's often an unspoken expectation that you'll return the favor eventually. For people who struggle with unpredictable schedules, limited resources, or social anxiety, this potential future obligation feels overwhelming. It's easier to avoid the help than manage the ongoing social accounting. Psychology also shows that some people avoid asking for help because they've internalized messages that independence equals strength and dependence equals weakness. These cultural narratives ignore the reality that humans are inherently interdependent, but they create shame around normal human needs for support and connection. But here's something beautiful about people who rarely ask for help. They often become incredibly resourceful problem solvers. Because you can't rely on others to rescue you, you develop creative solutions, persistence, and self-reliance that serves you well in many situations. Your independence isn't just psychological protection, it's practical competence. There's also this aspect where help-avoidant people often give help more freely and effectively than help seekers. Because you understand what it feels like to struggle alone, you're often the first person to notice when others need support and the last person to judge them for needing it. Research reveals that people who struggle with asking for help often have unrealistic standards for what they should be able to handle alone. You expect yourself to manage things that would challenge anyone, and you interpret normal human limitations as personal failures. This isn't high standards, it's impossible standards that nobody could meet consistently. And let's be honest about what modern culture teaches about help seeking. We're constantly told to figure it out yourself, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and be independent. Then we're surprised when people internalize these messages so deeply that they can't access support when they genuinely need it. Here's something that might change your perspective. The people who care about you actually want opportunities to help, because helping feels good and strengthens relationships. When you refuse help, you're not just protecting yourself, you're denying others the chance to experience the satisfaction of being useful and the closeness that comes from mutual support. Psychology shows that learning to ask for help appropriately is actually a sophisticated social skill that requires emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and relationship management. It's not weakness, it's advanced human functioning that many people never master. But there's a balance here that's important to find. Complete independence can become isolation, and isolation can become a prison of your own making. The goal isn't becoming dependent on others, it's becoming comfortable with interdependence, where you both give and receive support as part of healthy relationships. Maybe the question isn't, why can't I ask for help, but what would need to be true for asking for help to feel safe? Maybe you need people who offer without keeping score, who respect your autonomy while providing support, who understand that helping you doesn't change your fundamental competence. So the next time someone tells you to just ask for help, like it's simple, remember this: your independence was probably learned as survival strategy, in situations where dependence felt dangerous. That protective mechanism served you well, even if it sometimes serves you poorly. Now, you don't need to become someone who asks for help constantly. You just need to recognize when the cost of struggling alone exceeds the risk of reaching out. And maybe eventually you'll discover that the right people make help feel like collaboration rather than charity. Are you someone who struggles to ask for help, or do you reach out easily? What do you think makes requesting assistance so difficult for some people? Let me know, because I suspect there are more people out there carrying burdens they don't have to carry alone. To get more psychology content like this in your feed, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share your experiences with us. You'll be supporting our efforts too. Thanks for watching.